In the 4th year of our marriage, the live broadcast of my husband's proposal to Miss Ming's family exploded all over the internet. I was reduced from wife to unseen lover. That grand proposal ceremony came to an end. Jack Wilson rushed back from abroad and brought me valuable jewelry. He asked me with a smile, "Emma, did you miss me?" On the screen of the cell phone on the table was a picture of him and Miss Ming. I snapped the screen and smiled back, "Yes. And miss it a lot." There you go. The day after Jack Wilson lied to me about going overseas on business, I was in a small car accident. Luckily, my injuries were not serious. When I was woken up by the sound of the TV in the hospital room, I heard the patient in the next bed lamenting. Rich people are really, engagements are so grand. I raised my eyes, and on the screen, the ceremony had come to the exchange of rings. My legal husband, Jack Wilson, was on one knee, holding another woman's hand. The 8-carat diamond ring was so brilliant in the light that it hurt my eyes. It stung the eyes a little. I watched as he slowly pushed the ring into the person's knuckles. In a gentle tone, he promised, "Olivia, I will love you for a lifetime." The woman with exquisite makeup raised her lips and smiled with happiness. The young nurse, while changing my medication neatly, sighed, "Look quite right." I stared at the man's enlarged face on the screen and spoke abruptly, "That's my husband." The patient in the next bed froze for a moment. The nurse in her early 20s smiled a pair of small tiger teeth and spoke with a high level of emotion, I know. My ex-husband is still Chen Guanlin." The next bed realized. I blinked and didn't say another word. They didn't know. Jack Wilson is really my husband. A red book kind of guy. The story of Jack Wilson and I, if you put it in a book, is that of a door-to-door childhood sweetheart. There was no heavenly descent, no straddling of the fence. There's only a 20-year relationship and a watered-down marriage. With so many spouses and luxury marriages, Jack Wilson and I were the most envied couple in the circle. It's a pity that life is never a sweet favorite. A year after our marriage, my family went bankrupt. My brother went to jail. The company fell apart. What happened? On the day my brother was arrested, Jack Wilson took the earliest flight home. His hair was disheveled and his shirt was wrinkled. When he walked through the door, he ran straight to me and wrapped me in his arms. "Emma." He clasped me in his arms, his voice still muffled from the night's sleep. "I'm here. I'll always be there for you. I'll always be there for you." And then he didn't lie. He stayed by my side for the next 3 years. But I was no longer his apparent wife. It was as if everyone agreed that Jack Wilson and I had gotten a low-profile divorce. In this way, he has ostentatiously cleared all relations with my family. And yet, he kept me tied to him. I had been discharged from the hospital the day Jack Wilson came back and didn't go to the airport to pick him up. When the door was opened, I was looking at a picture someone had sent me. It was taken on the day of the engagement. The woman standing beside Jack Wilson has long straight hair and white skin. When she smiled, the corners of her lips were slightly raised, and her color was like a murderous knife. She was holding Jack Wilson's hand tightly. The eldest daughter of the Ming family, Olivia Green. I lowered my eyes to zoom in on the photo, snapping the screen again the moment I heard the door slam and looked over at the visitor. Jack Wilson, with a smile on his brow and a bit of exhaustion on his face, shakes the gift box in his hand at me, "Emma. The new Bulgari necklace." When my family wasn't broke, I had a hobby of collecting jewelry. Then my card was emptied overnight and I had no more money to spend. Jack Wilson indulged me. Whenever I liked something, he would buy it without hesitation. I looked at him and smiled, asking, "Jack, is there anything you want to tell me?" I was waiting for him to confess. Jack Wilson's gaze flickered and his eyes wandered involuntarily. He raised a somewhat fake smile and softly whispered, "Did you miss me?" I lowered my eyes, hardening the love Emma that was rising in my chest. When I opened my mouth, my tone was already normal. "Yes," I said, "and want very much." Jack Wilson's expression loosened. "What have you been doing at home these past few days?" "A friend asked me to go out and spend a couple days at the lodge. The signal is bad in the mountains, it takes half a day to get back to you." He put the box in front of me. "Go try it?" I stood on my tiptoes and kissed his face. Jack Wilson grabbed me by the waist and smiled, "I'll carry my wife." Emerald necklaces were placed on the stand, reflecting radiant light with the rest of the necklaces. The ultimate home for beautiful jewelry is the clear case. I love the colorful light reflected by the jewelry. In the hallowed room, it reflects off the intricate crystal lamps and the clear liquid in the glass. It adds color to the wearer. But I hadn't been to a party in a long time. My cell phone chimed. I unlocked it and saw another message from the strange number that had sent the photo. Our engagement party, compared to your wedding party back then. How was it? I didn't reply and tapped the red delete button. The cell phone screen went blank. I lay back on my bed and let out a cloudy breath. I actually met Olivia Green a long time ago. Not long after our Nan family had just fallen on hard times, Jack Wilson couldn't carry the pressure from his family and sent me to a public house. That's when Olivia Green showed up. She picked a time when Jack Wilson wasn't around, carrying a new limited edition bag from Dee's, the diamonds on her ears reflecting the blinding light. She stood in front of my house and rang the doorbell over and over again. She didn't look at me when I opened the door. She didn't look at me when I opened the door and stepped in, leaving a gray shoe print on the floor. I'll be engaged to Jack Wilson. She sits on the couch and looks at me and smiles, the corners of her lips raised to a contemptuous curve, towering over me. My friends say he's a golden girl, someone he's desperately trying to protect from his family. I've come to see how much he loves. She met my eyes and smiled like Cinderella's stepsister in a fairy tale. Despicable and disdainful. I thought how much love, but that's all. What's wrong with keeping a man in a 3-children's home? Mrs. Thompson's family's fallen on hard times, and she started taking lovers for rich people too? She snorted, playing with the tassel on her bag. Why don't you quit? It's not a good idea to lose both your money and your family. I shook my head. The anger in Olivia Green's eyes rises, and she's about to open her mouth when I say, I love Jack Wilson. She looks like she's laughing in anger. Love? What do you think your love is worth? The Ming family behind me, or the position of heir he's longed for? The glass on the table was brought down by her, and the broken glass nearly splashed my calf. I lowered my eyes and stepped on the tiny shards as I walked over to her. The expression on Olivia Green's face crumbles for a split second. I look at her and ask calmly, So, want to bet with me? Jack Wilson had to work the next day, so I took care of the paperwork in my study and thought that he shouldn't eat much abroad, so I cooked for lunch. Prepared to bring it to his company. When I got downstairs, I called his personal secretary. Tom Brown used to have a pretty good relationship with me and came down to pick me up after receiving the call. I walked all the way to Jack Wilson's office door, and on the way, I ran into a small staff whispering. Who's that? He looks like he's headed for little Chairman Wilson's office. Auntie at home? Is she that pretty? Maybe rich people's families are looking for good looks. It wouldn't be little Chairman Wilson's proposal, would it? The laborer gritted his teeth. Little Chairman Wilson doesn't look like her. Tom Brown led me to the office door. Tom Brown leads me to the office door, which is ajar. A man's voice came from inside. I asked you to break it off with her, and you wouldn't. You think I don't know you're keeping her out? I used to let you, but now that you're engaged to Olivia Green, you need to be clean. How else are you going to explain it to the Ming family? Father Wilson's voice was laced with anger. You're just playing around with a poor girl. Do you really think she's a treasure? I heard that Ryan Wilson has recently gotten involved with the head of GC Corporation. If he really takes over the deal, do you think you'll still be able to hold on to your position? GC is a mysterious newcomer that has emerged in recent years. Rumor has it that this company has the core secrets of the bankrupt Nan Group that countless people have been trying to get their hands on. You have to get ahead of Ryan Wilson and take the cooperation with them. Jack Wilson. You. Tom Brown had a cold chill on his forehead. Tom Brown's forehead broke out in a cold sweat, and he whispered, Sister Emma, why don't we? First? He didn't finish his words, but was first interrupted by a voice from inside. I heard my husband say. I know. He didn't retort. Tom Brown added more sweat to his forehead as he shuddered, expediently. Chairman Wilson just wanted to get there first. I pursed my lips and smiled, cutting him off gently. I know. I'm going to go ahead and don't tell him I was here today. I looked to Tom Brown, my gaze slightly narrowed. It's terrible when couples fall out. But the trigger is the one that's the worst person to be around. Ode, I smiled, looking calm, do you understand? He nodded repeatedly. I was almost home when I got the call from Jack Wilson. The man's voice was slightly raspy, his tone gentle and no different than usual. "Emma, I'm taking you to the auction tonight. There's a necklace you used to love that's up for auction today." When I got off the bus, it was windy, and the dust fell into my eyes, making them a little sore. I didn't say anything. "Emma?" I rubbed my eyes, a tear in the corner of my eye. "Jack Wilson." I called his name, with a bit of a sniffle. "Do you love me?" "Yes." He answered without hesitation, and then a moment later he was alert. "What's wrong?" "What happened?" "Nothing," I said. "I was just thinking, we've been together for so long, don't you ever get tired of it?" "What's that stupid thing to say?" Jack Wilson laughed. "I wouldn't get tired of you." I said, "I wouldn't even if you didn't." The man's laugh was low and tame, and Jack Wilson's final voice was solemn like pre-wedding vows. "Emma, I'll always love you." I hung up the phone. 2 more tears fell as I stood in the wind. Not because of the sand. The secrecy of the box at the auction house was well guarded. No one would know that the engaged little Chairman Wilson would bring his wife, who had been reduced to a secret lover. The room was filled with bidding increases. The final crushing necklace startled the crowd. The 16-carat Sri Lankan sapphire sparkled in the light. The pink chalcedony and diamonds that surrounded the sapphire complemented it. My eyes lit up. Jack Wilson glanced sideways at me, curling his lips slightly when he noticed my demeanor had changed. "I remember being like 20 years old when you saw it and your eyes lit up. I couldn't afford it then." "Emma." His eyes curved, their color as soft as spring water. "Now, I can give it to you." I didn't say a word, watching him open with an astronomical figure. There was an intake of breath in the venue. One after another, people raised their bids. But no one could top Jack Wilson. Until the end, the auction hammer never rang the third time. I looked at Jack Wilson's slightly wrinkled eyebrows. The display screen broadcasts the situation inside the venue. The person fighting Jack Wilson wasn't sitting in the box. It wasn't long before they were captured. Olivia Green, spine straight, raises her own card without skipping a beat as she hears Jack Wilson's offer and quotes another, higher price. Jack Wilson's eyes finally land on the display. The moment he looks over at Olivia Green, his face changes. Realizing I'm there, it goes back to business as usual. Looking down, he taps a few times on his phone. I saw Olivia Green on the display hang her head, tap on her own phone, and reply with a message. Jack Wilson's phone vibrated once, still not forgetting to raise his hand. 15 million. He looked down and quickly edited a message. As the auctioneer hit the second click, the offer sign in Olivia Green's hand slowed as she lowered her head. It was lowered again before it was raised. $15 million a second time. $15 million third. The hammer is set. The staff comes up to collect the necklace and prepares to head to our box. Jack Wilson turns to me with a light apology between his eyebrows. "Emma, I'm sorry. This necklace. A friend of mine's mother really liked it too." I smiled in realization and my voice was gentle. "Can't you give me something else?" For the first time I was assertive. "Jack Wilson, I really like this necklace too. You know, love it." I intensified my tone and Jack Wilson looked over at me and frowned. He said, "Emma, behave." I didn't say anything. He softened his voice as if he realized his tone was a bit heavy and said, "Next time I see something similar, I'll take a picture of it and give it to you, okay?" That's what he said to me 3 years ago. The company went bankrupt and my brother went to jail. My well-maintained parents looked like they had aged 20 years overnight. Jack Wilson helped my family pay off some of the debt. My parents, who were still working on my brother's behalf, approached me, and my mother's temples were already gray. She looked at me, half coaxing, half commanding, "Emma, go beg Jack Wilson. He loves you so much, go beg him to keep our family's company. When your brother gets out of jail, he won't be left with nothing." She said, "Emma, Mom and Dad are begging you. Please, okay?" I was standing in the doorway, the cold wind whistling into my clothes. They didn't say anything about letting me in for a hot cup of tea first. Mom made to kneel down. I clutched her hand for a long time before saying, "I'll try." I went out the door and went to Jack Wilson's. It was Tom Brown who picked me up upstairs. Jack Wilson was sitting in front of the floor-to-ceiling window working on paperwork, and smiled and got up when he saw me coming. I clutched my hand, a little embarrassed. Jack Wilson, I said, could you? Before the words left my mouth, I glanced at a document on his desk. The acquisition plan in black and white, with the name of our family's company clearly listed in front of it. I froze for a split second and looked up. Jack Wilson, you're acquiring my family's company? Jack Wilson froze and smiled gently. It's just a plan, it hasn't materialized yet. Then can you help me? I blurted out. Help me keep our company. The smile on Jack Wilson's face faded a bit. He shook his head. I wanted to ask him why. Jack Wilson looked at me. Emma, even if I don't buy your family's company, there will be others. It's a fat piece of meat right now. He commented objectively, you can't protect it. But I don't want it to be you. Jack Wilson narrowed his eyes, his voice soft. Emma. He said, you know, business is business. I know that. I was going to say something else. Jack Wilson stopped looking at me and said in a quiet voice, Emma, do as you're told. I didn't open my mouth again. In fact, I know that money and power can sometimes easily change a person's mold. I also know that only the one at the top holds the power of speech. So actually, I wasn't particularly upset that day. But in the end, Jack Wilson didn't get what he wanted either. The key people at the company who held the core technology seemed to sense it before the wind blew. They left first. No one knows where they are. The necklace, eventually, was delivered by the staff, respectfully, to Olivia Green. I didn't tough it out to the end, I just smiled. So what are you going to make it up to me with? Jack Wilson's face eased. He stroked my hair and asked me, so what do you want, Emma? Do you give anything you want? I ask. Jack Wilson nods. I said I heard the Wilsons are having a party next week. I haven't been to one in a long time. Jack Wilson, I look pale, can you take me? I watched as the man in front of me changed his face quickly. I actually make very few requests. I disappeared from the scene after being raised by Jack Wilson in the public house. I was well behaved, understanding, and never gave Jack Wilson a hard time. I obeyed his wishes, quietly, as his unseen pillow. Jack Wilson looked at me with no expression. Jack Wilson looked at me without expression. He said, I'm sorry, Emma. I interrupted him and said nicely, I know. The latent crack suddenly widened infinitely on this night. No one talks while Jack Wilson and I are in the car. I was sitting on the other side of the car when my cell phone vibrated and I unlocked it. Seeing the same unfamiliar number, it sent a picture. It was a screenshot of a chat. It was Jack Wilson who started the conversation. You like that necklace? Olivia Green returned. My mom loves it. Jack Wilson. I'll deliver it. Another smiling emoji pops up behind the picture. I can almost picture Olivia Green typing that line with a smile on her face. It looks like someone's going to lose a lot of money. I turn off the screen and lean back. Lean back against the car window, and close my eyes. My relationship with Jack Wilson started to get weird. I was reluctant to talk to him, and Jack Wilson was self-conscious of his shortcomings. His posture was low when he confronted me. The morning of the party, my attitude finally loosened. I tied his tie as I left the house. Jack Wilson smiled and kissed my forehead, his voice slightly hoarse. Emma. Wait for me tonight. I sent him off with a smile on my face. 2 hours before the party started, I called Jack Wilson at home. The moment I got through, it was Jack Wilson calling my name softly and lovingly, Emma. I didn't answer. Suddenly and abruptly, he said, Actually, I know everything. The person on the other end of the line froze for a moment, not responding. What? I said, Actually, I saw it. It was a big engagement party. Olivia Green is beautiful, and you guys look great together. I also know that at today's dinner, the mysterious man in charge behind GC will make an appearance. Jack Wilson is going to fight Ryan Wilson. If he takes the partnership, his position as heir is secure. He'll have to lean on the Ming family. So no matter what, I can't show up tonight. I opened the window and the harsh north wind blew on my face. My nose was a little sore. I asked him, Jack Wilson, what do you really think I am? A canary to be kept for fun, or a lover who can't get laid? No. Jack Wilson interrupted me anxiously. No, Emma. Listen to me. I interrupted, Jack Wilson, I'm going to ask you one last time. Can I, as your wife, attend this dinner? This is your last chance. Jack Wilson. Jack Wilson. The wind whistled in my ears. It was a long time before I heard his answer. I'm sorry, Emma, he says. I dryly hit the hang-up button. I hope you won't be sorry, Jack Wilson. The phone rings again immediately afterward and I press answer. The voice on the other end is respectful. Are you ready? I'm coming to get you. I still came to the party. There were no flashy dresses, no elegant heels. The waiter who greeted me at the door, however, still smiled respectfully. The man who resembled Jack Wilson stood there, extending his hand toward me. Ryan Wilson smiled with an arched eyebrow, as sly as a fox that has practiced for 1,000 years. Little Emma. I'm glad you chose me in the end. I haven't been to a party like this in 3 years. In the magnificent halls, men and women dressed in gorgeous clothes came and went. The men and women in their finery come and go, mingling with each other. It brought up the crisp sound of glass clinking. I stood on the stairs of the second floor and looked down. The crowd is packed, but I catch a glimpse of Jack Wilson. Olivia Green's hand was in the crook of his arm, and the smiles on both of their faces floated to the surface. It looked inexplicably good together. Ryan Wilson stood beside me and asked me with a smile, "What's it like?" I didn't answer, but he didn't care, his fox eyes curving. "It's time, little Emma. We're going on stage." There was a moment of silence as Ryan Wilson and I walked down from the second floor. The practiced old fox is as calm as can be. Smiling, he said, "I have good news for you all. Today, Wilson's group has officially entered into a partnership with GC." He turned to me, smiling. "This is GC's President Thompson, Emma Thompson." As a young girl, I hated such gilded fame and fortune. Because my parents would make me wear beautiful but abrasive high heels, stranglingly gorgeous dresses, showing me off to everyone like a commodity. Only Jack Wilson would hold my hand. I say, "I don't want to be here." He looks at me and a little smile floats across his cold face, "Then we'll run away together." I nod. He then takes me and slips away. Running to a quiet corner where no one else is, taking off the heels that grind my feet and undoing the ribbon that binds my waist. The two of us lean together and look at the stars in the night sky, talking about things that don't make sense. When my mom finds out, Jack Wilson will take all the blame and say he had to take me. My mom wouldn't get mad. Because in her eyes, Jack Wilson was the one person who might pay for this item of mine in the future. I realized later that it wasn't really the fame and fortune that I hated. It's that I don't want to be treated like a commodity. I wanted to be a businessman, too. I met Jack Wilson's eyes through the overlapping silhouettes. I see his suddenly gray face. I raise my glass in the air. The clear brown liquid swirls under the intricate crystal lights. I raise my glass distantly. Olivia Green abruptly releases her grip on his arm. In a crowded room, I read her lips. "I'm out of money." The day Olivia Green first came to see me at my house, I asked her if she wanted to bet with me. Her face regained its composure after a brief moment of surprise. "Bet on what? Jack Wilson?" "Mrs. Thompson, you don't think you have the capital to sit at the same table with me, do you?" My eyes skimmed over her delicate face and I smiled. Actually, I didn't know Olivia Green very well once upon a time. Occasionally, I heard gossip about her, saying that she had a fight with her parents in order to go to the university she wanted to go to. She was born with a rebellious and unruly nature. I don't think someone like that would be willing to sacrifice her marriage for the family. Olivia Green. I call her name. "I'd like to bet on our future. Do you want to work with me? I have the resources and the brains. You've got the money, and you've got first-hand knowledge of the circle. Our path will be much better than others." I looked down, my fingers wrapping around the hair on her cheek. "We don't need a marriage to prove our worth. Olivia Green. I want to show them. The original. Our worth. Are you so confident?" Olivia Green looks over at me, her eyes full of laughter but not skepticism. I smiled. As a child, my parents loved to make me learn etiquette, flower arranging, piano, and music appreciation. But they let my brother learn finance, money management, investment. All the money invested in me was just so that I, the commodity, could increase in value later on. It's a good thing my brother is such a dumbass. Unschooled as a youngster, pushing all the after-school homework onto my head. Growing up empty-headed, taking all the credit for all the things I won. As an adult, my brother took over the company and I followed him around as his helper. He pushed everything on me, and lest I become too capable, took all the credit and kicked me out of the company before I could secure my position. My parents didn't have any objections, they just looked at me and said, "Emma, you have to put your brother first in everything." I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just nodded my head, as obediently as I had been for the past 20 years. The company's decline was faster than my own. The company fell apart faster than I expected. I wasn't surprised when my brother ended up in prison. "Olivia Green," I said in a warm voice. "Guess what, the ones they were trying to find from the South Group. Who's got them now?" The people who had shunned me 3 years ago seemed to have changed their faces, and each of them warmed up as if they had been friends for years. I carry a glass of wine, smiling and clink glasses with them. It's hard to find true love in the shopping mall. Whoever is in power will be sought after, and whoever is down will be shunned. Ryan Wilson has been by my side all the time, with a proper demeanor, intimate but not out of line. Jack Wilson stood in the outer circle. Jack Wilson stood in the outer circle, cold and quiet. He didn't seem to care. He just looked at me. Ryan Wilson laughed and his arms suddenly wrapped around my waist, pulling me to him. The impudent waiter quickly grabbed the glass that was about to tip over, and 2 or 3 drops of liquid landed on the spot where I had just been standing. I pressed against his side and Ryan Wilson let go, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Be careful, little Emma." I tugged at the corner of my lips and didn't say anything. When the party was about to break up, Wilson's old man could not wait to come out. Over 80 years old, hale and hearty, sitting on the pearwood seat looking at me smiling. "Little Emma, come over here, Grandpa hasn't seen you for a long time." Ryan Wilson and I walked over to him. He looked at me for a few moments and praised me. "Good, good. When I was a kid I thought you were much better than your brother." The middle-aged man standing beside the old man was silent, his face sullen. It was Jack Wilson's father. Ryan Wilson's mother, Alice Brown, wearing a cheongsam, smiled and removed the jade bracelet on her wrist. The seed water is transparent and delicate in the hand. The well-maintained woman took my hand and put the jade bracelet on my wrist, smiling intimately. "Once upon a time I had a connection with little Emma," she said. "When I was younger, I even found a love letter he wrote to you in Di's room." She winked and laughed. "I wish our Ryan Wilson had that kind of luck." I smiled but didn't excuse myself and politely thanked her. Alice Brown snapped, "Di, what are you waiting for? You see off little Emma." Ryan Wilson answered with a smile. Making a please motion towards me, I took his arm. No one mentioned Jack Wilson. Everyone tacitly avoided my former marriage to Jack Wilson. Surface politeness and respect were maintained. The rules of the family are simple and brutal. Money and power are the hardest passes here. I could feel Jack Wilson's eyes on me from behind. But I didn't look back. The moment he was out the door, Ryan Wilson paused and looked at me sideways. I read his gaze and smiled. "Let's go." The press, sniffing the wind, had long been waiting outside the door. Once Ryan Wilson and I were out in the open, any subtle gesture would be magnified infinitely. Taking all the plausible details and catching them and blurring them into an ambiguous male-female relationship. Turning serious news into publicized peachy news. The Wilson family may not be unaware. It's just that. That's what they want. Heat, as well. Realizing all those partnership opportunities that come with having 2 families so close. Ryan Wilson warmed his voice. "I thought, you wouldn't like this." A few wisps of wind wafted through the crack, bringing up a strand of hair from the corner of my forehead. I brushed my hair back, my voice frank. "It's revenge. I wanted Jack Wilson to know. Left behind by him, hidden from him, to get engaged to another woman. The whole world knew that the love of his life was with another. But only you know. That's what it feels like, to be the love of your life." Ryan Wilson laughed and didn't say anything, just reached out. Pulling a strand of hair from my cheek. The flashers outside the door flashed several times. It continued until Ryan Wilson and I were in the car, with someone else following us. Between waiting for the red light, Ryan Wilson's hand was on the steering wheel, tapping it a few times. Suddenly, he asked me, "Little Emma, have you thought about how you're going to face Jack Wilson when you get home?" I propped my hand on the edge of the window and looked out the window at the still landscape with a sideways glance. "He won't blame me. Ripping open wounds that are about to tear, questioning, accusing, hysterizing, into scars that will never heal. After the veil is removed, we'll never be the same again. Whitewash. The most loathsome and hopeless necessity of adulthood. I laughed. Business is business. He taught me that. I've given him plenty of chances. From the time he put me in the Manhattan mansion, to the last time I asked him if he'd take me to a party. 3 years. If he had turned back once, we wouldn't be here today. What's the matter? The car finally pulls over. Ryan Wilson got out of the car and opened the door for me and walked me to the door. Behind me, the entertainment reporter gets out of the car and Ryan Wilson puts his arm around my waist in an intimate manner. I stopped and looked at him and smiled. Here it is. Ryan Wilson looks at me but doesn't move. I cocked my head slightly and Ryan Wilson smiled, the fox's bad intentions showing a trifle. He suddenly leaned over and his deliberately low voice fell on my ear. I'd like to add more fire to the fire. He lowers his head. A kiss falls softly. The sound of the shutter behind us is slight, but still falls into our ears. Ryan Wilson drops his hand, waving at me with an arched eyebrow. Bye, little Emma. Ryan Wilson was sitting on the couch when I entered, not much expression on his face. He froze for a moment when he saw me, then a small smile surfaced. Emma. He didn't ask me when I became the head of GC, or why I chose Ryan Wilson. He just asked, just now, it was Ryan Wilson who gave you a ride home, wasn't it? I said unnecessarily, didn't you see it all? He froze for a moment and suddenly said, he kissed you. I knew the view upstairs was just right. I knew that with Ryan Wilson's bad intentions, he'd have to count it all out. But it was something I'd tacitly agreed to. You saw it. It was an act, I said calmly. He didn't kiss me, he was just lending a hand. You should have been able to see through it from your point of view. Ryan Wilson's hand brushed my hair as he looked down. The kiss landed on his own knuckles. Charming, ambiguous. But it was never inappropriate. Playing along? Jack Wilson murmured. There were no lights on in the room. The bright moonlight outside fell on the polished marble floor of the living room. You'll understand me, won't you? I changed my slippers and walked slowly towards Jack Wilson. You don't want to break up with your parents and you want to protect me. I walk up to Jack Wilson and reach out, dragging his face up. Jack Wilson looks up at me, his eyes reflecting the moonlight outside the window, but divided by the unknown love of Emma. Confused, vulnerable. I warmed my voice. Now your parents will never let me leave you again. Isn't that what you always wanted? Aren't you happy? Jack? Jack Wilson looked at me. For a while. He suddenly lowers his head, grabs my hand to his lips, and drops a kiss. Right. Emma. The Ryan Wilson and I rumor mill was getting hotter by the day. There were even whispers that we'd be getting married by the end of the year. Ryan Wilson never responded. Our paths crossed more and more as we worked together as a company. While working on paperwork at the office, I got a call from Olivia Green. Missy didn't say a word. I heard the sound of heels on the other end of the line. Just like the day she approached me. Olivia Green's voice was a little far away, but it was clear to my ears. Missy's voice is nonchalant as she takes a seat on the couch. I've come to inform you. Our engagement is off. Jack Wilson didn't say a word. Olivia Green laughed. Jack Wilson. Shortcuts are easy, aren't they? All those opportunities and resources that the next guy is trying to figure out, you can get them through a relationship. You took the first one, and you want to take the second. I'm sorry. The door was knocked by the secretary, and the little girl approached holding a few documents. President Thompson. I made a shushing motion. She was immediately silenced. After a brief interlude, I heard Olivia Green's last words. It was mixed with a kind smile, yet so sure. Jack Wilson. You don't deserve Emma Thompson. After chatting with the rumor monger about working together, Ryan Wilson offered to take me home. I cocked my head at him. There's no use in speculating anymore. The heat is almost over. Ryan Wilson looks at me and smiles, an old fox with a tricky demeanor. It's selfish. Come on, little Emma. This time he doesn't park in front of the neighborhood, but walks me to my door. Ryan Wilson gets out of the car and opens the door for me, a gentleman as usual. I raised my eyes just in time to meet his downcast ones. I froze for a moment as the eyes met. Ryan Wilson suddenly spoke up. Is it really out of the question? Little Emma. What if he says it's all because he loves you? I dropped my eyes. I lowered my eyes. Is it love, or is it just a little mercy and charity falling from the fingers of a higher power? You probably know better than I do. Ryan Wilson laughed and withdrew his hand, his voice returning to its usual off-key tone. I would never have made such a foolish move as turning my original wife into a lover. Assuming that back then was one of the most pointless things ever. I shrug. Ryan Wilson laughs and takes 2 steps back. The light cast by the street lamp falls into his eyes. For the first time, those fox eyes, which have never been full of laughter, making it impossible to see inside, are not disguised. Little Emma. It was clearly a question, but he said it in a matter-of-fact way. You wouldn't know it. He looked at me, the corners of his lips upturned, but there was something almost lonely light in his eyes. How many years I'd waited for Jack Wilson to get out. The sound of something tumbling down came from behind him. Jack Wilson stood on the patio, and after a brief moment of stunned silence, he ran quickly toward Ryan Wilson. The punch landed in the corner of Ryan Wilson's mouth. He didn't duck. The corner of Ryan Wilson's lip broke the skin and a few drops of crimson blood fell. It further set off his skin a sickly white, like a male vixen in Liao Zhai who sucked people's essence and blood. Jack Wilson. I snapped. He didn't look at me, his eyes fell on Ryan Wilson's face. Ryan Wilson smiled, raising his hand to wipe the blood from the corner of his lip, his voice calm. You can't keep her, Jack Wilson. Because she loved you before. So I couldn't fight you, and now you're the one who's stupid, Jack Wilson. You deserve it. Jack Wilson doesn't say anything, looks at him and raises his hand. I quickly step forward and grab Jack Wilson's hand. Ryan Wilson smiles and waves at me. See you tomorrow, little Emma. Adding fuel to the fire. I glared at him. Ryan Wilson curled his lip and drove off. Jack Wilson's hand moved in my grip, wrapping my hand back in his palm. I was just about to speak when my entire body was encircled in his arms. The arms around me slowly tightened. Like he was trying to keep something. Jack Wilson. I called to him, let go. Jack Wilson didn't move and buried his head in the crook of my neck. The night wind was a little cool. But something hot fell on the nape of my neck. After a long, long time. I heard Jack Wilson ask me, Emma. Do you love me? I didn't say anything. Jack Wilson tightened his hands around my waist. Don't leave me. Emma. I'm not sure what I mean. Jack Wilson and I have known each other for more than 20 years. We met when we were young and promised each other our lives. He's always been cool and collected in front of me. Outside of me, he's never been afraid to say anything. When I was 18 or 19, my friends joked that Jack Wilson's face was unchanged, in short. In short, a dead, paralyzed face. A close friend had a flash of insight and said he wanted to know when he would panic. I know. Emma Thompson. When someone steals Emma Thompson from him. I smiled and looked over at Jack Wilson, who locked eyes with me, eyes like spring water, and swore. No one's ever taken me. Everyone around me chimes in, ch-. And if one day Emma Thompson doesn't want you. Jack Wilson's grip on my hand tightened for a split second. She won't. I held his hand back and said warmly, I won't. I'm not going to. Later on, the show was over. Jack Wilson walked me home. The shadows under the streetlight were stretched out indefinitely. The hands clasped in the center swayed. I jumped over the reflection of a telephone pole and suddenly looked sideways. That's right, Jack Wilson. Actually, I'd like to know. What if one day? I trailed off, my tone flirtatious. What would you do if I really didn't want you anymore? At that time, Jack Wilson still had a trace of youthful spirit. He pulled me into his arms. Jack Wilson lowered his head and kissed me between my eyebrows. It tickled me. Talk. Tell me. I'm afraid to think. Jack Wilson answered honestly. I want to know. Jack Wilson looks up as if he's thinking hard. I headbutt him on the chin, and Jack Wilson is disrupted by me, his hands grabbing my waist and securing me in his arms. When he looks down, the crushed hair at the top of his forehead is illuminated almost transparently by the street light. Maybe. He frowns with a smile. It's going to be crazy. At 18 or 19 years old, only the moment you make a vow becomes forever. Lovers who have come to a fork in the road don't like to rehash old memories. So in the end, I didn't say anything. Things in the company gradually increased, but I became busier than before. The company's stock price was booming. I began to have no time for Jack Wilson. I was flying all over the world. I'd come home once in a while, but I couldn't talk to him. I was so busy, I couldn't think of anything else to do. The day Jack Wilson filed for divorce was the day after I returned from a business trip abroad. I woke up from my sleep, and when I came downstairs, I saw him fully dressed, sitting in front of the coffee table. I looked at him with some surprise. Jack Wilson looked at me and said, "Emma, let's get a divorce." I didn't say yes or no. I just walked over to the couch and picked up the divorce papers on the table and read them. Jack Wilson drew up the divorce papers with charity. He didn't take anything. Just took what was rightfully his. There was also a special separate listing for a wedding picture that had been hanging in the living room. I didn't hesitate when I signed it. Jack Wilson took his seat and watched quietly as I finished signing. When I raised my eyes, I took a few rare moments to scrutinize him. Jack Wilson had lost a lot of weight, and with Ryan Wilson in charge he wouldn't be given a second chance. All the avenues for him to start his own business had been blocked. His pride was such that he wouldn't ask me for a favor. The shirt that had fit him was suddenly a little empty. Jack Wilson's knuckles whitened as he gripped the agreement, as if he had used a great deal of force. "Emma." He spoke suddenly, without looking at me. His eyes were on the divorce papers. But I could see the faint redness at the end of his eyes more clearly than ever. He said, "I thought that you would stay." I looked over at him. "You don't have to test me, Jack Wilson. I'm not in love with Ryan Wilson. And I don't hate you." I leaned back on the back of the couch. I was a little tired from the long flight. I don't love you anymore. You can change the agreement at any time, and I'll do whatever's reasonable. Financial. I meant it. Jack Wilson just looked at me, his voice husky. "You know, Emma. You know. What I want more than anything." I didn't say anything. Jack Wilson, on the other hand, was breaking down. "I was wrong. Emma. I was wrong. I shouldn't have lied to you, I shouldn't have hidden you like a lover, I shouldn't have thought that no matter what you wouldn't leave me. I was wrong. Emma." Jack Wilson's body heat burns a little. My eyes fall on the teardrops at the corners of his eyes. I reached out, and gently wiped them away. Jack Wilson's eyes are red and he grabs my hand. "I'm sorry, Emma. You don't want to leave me. I don't want to divorce you. I'm just afraid of." His voice was getting lower and lower. "I don't want anything. Emma." Jack Wilson looked up. His tear-stained lashes were disheveled, and the light in his eyes was broken. "Just you." I dropped my eyes. Breaking Jack Wilson's hands one by one. I said, "Forget it." Jack Wilson was really my husband. Jack Wilson and I got a divorce. It was raining the day I got the red book. It stopped when I came out of the civil office. I stood in the doorway with Jack Wilson. I stood at the door to say goodbye to Jack Wilson. He didn't say anything, just looked at me. He just looked at me, tracing my silhouette over and over again. I sighed, and for the first time, I broke the ice between us. "You know it all. Jack Wilson, when I was young, you said, 'Let's run away together,' and I said yes. Do you remember? A commodity in your parents' hands, a bird in your cage. What's the difference? Jack Wilson was silent. I smiled, not expecting an answer from him. "There's no difference. But I don't want to be a commodity to be sold or a canary to be kept. I just want to be me. To be Emma Thompson, always free, always spontaneous, always ambitious." I waved my hand and laughed. "See you later." End of text.